Ever seen one of those big yellow school buses rolling down the street? Makes you think, doesn't it? About all those kids, all those teachers, all that. Well, money, frankly.
Yeah.
And is it all actually working the way it should?
It's a question a lot of folks are asking these days, that's for sure.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today on the Journeyman podcast. This is episode 49, and, well, let's just say we're going deep, like foundation level deep, into American education. Specifically, the whole debate around the U.S. Department of Education, the DOE.
We're even going to touch on some pretty radical ideas out there, like getting rid of the DOE altogether.
Yep, abolishing it. Now, before we get too far, we've got a stack of sources we're pulling from today, our own notes, of course, but also a really interesting transcript from our friends over at Rattlesnake TV.
Gotta give them a shout out, seriously.
Absolutely. We'll put a link to their original stuff down in the description so you can check it out yourself. But the point here, our mission, isn't to tell you what to think. It's to help you, the learner, get a grip on what the core arguments are, what the different sides are saying about this whole DOE thing.
Lots of strong opinions out there on both sides.
No kidding. And we want to lay it all out there clearly and fairly without taking sides ourselves. Now, if you're digging this kind of deep dive, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the Journeyman podcast. More deep dives coming your way, and you won't want to miss them.
And like you said, go check out Rattlesnake TV on YouTube. Give them a subscribe, too.
Okay, let's get into it. So, the U.S. Department of Education. It's not exactly ancient history, is it?
Nope, not at all. We're talking 1980. Jimmy Carter was president when the DOE was born.
Right, and the idea, from what I gather, was to get all the federal stuff related to education under one roof, so to speak. Make it more centralized.
Make it more fair, too. That was a big part of it. Make sure every kid, no matter where they lived or what their background was, had a shot at a good education.
Raise those standards across the board. Sounds good on paper, right?
Sure does. But that's where things get kind of sticky.
Because the results, well...
Let's just say the results don't exactly scream mission accomplished.
Right. Our sources actually point to this chart. I think it was in the Rattlesnake TV segment. And it basically shows that in some ways, education hasn't gotten that much better since the DOE came along.
Yeah.
Some things might even be worse.
Some folks even argue that the DOE has actually held us back.
Held us back? How so?
Well, the thinking is that when you've got this big centralized system, it can stifle innovation.
So instead of states and local communities coming up with their own solutions, they're stuck following rules from Washington.
Yeah, and those rules might not be the best fit for every place. Different states have different needs, different challenges. One size fits all doesn't always work in education.
Interesting. And speaking of fits, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. Money.
Oh, yeah, the big one.
Because it turns out the U.S. spends a ton of money on education. Per student, we're supposedly #1 in the world.
Yep. But here's the kicker. Our results don't match that spending.
We're talking like 37th to 40th in the world for overall education performance.
Yeah, it's a pretty big gap. Makes you wonder where all that money's going.
Well, the DOE's budget is enormous, something like $280 billion a year. But here's a stat that blew my mind. Less than 25% of that actually goes directly to teaching kids in classrooms.
That's right. Most of it gets eaten up by the bureaucracy. Running a giant federal department ain't cheap.
Then you've got consultants, all these studies and reports.
NGOs getting their share, too.
And that's where you get those accusations of money laundering and money suring flying around.
Strong words for sure. But it highlights a real concern. Is all this money actually making a difference?
Or is it just disappearing down a black hole?
And that's where the argument for abolishing the DOE comes in.
Just get rid of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a radical idea, but it's got some serious support. In fact, if you remember, Trump made it a big part of his platform.
Oh, yeah, he was all about shrinking the federal government.
Exactly. And for him, education was a prime example of something that should be handled at the state level, not by Washington.
So more power to the states.
Right. Let them decide how to spend the money, what to teach, how to run their schools.
And the thinking is that this would lead to more innovation, more accountability, better results.
That's the hope, anyway.
Now, beyond the whole states' rights thing, another big argument against the DOE is simply that it hasn't delivered.
It hasn't lived up to the hype.
We talked about those international rankings, the high cost, low performance thing.
And some folks say things have actually gotten worse since the DOE was created.
Like test scores going down, literacy rates stagnating.
Yeah, and they point to that as proof that the DOE is failing.
Failing the students, failing the teachers, failing the whole country.
And if it's not working, why keep pouring money into it? Why not just scrap it and start over?
Okay, so you get rid of the DOE. What happens to all that money?
Well, the idea is that it would go back to the states.
in the form of block grants.
Right. And then the states could decide how to use it. Hopefully, they'd put it directly into classrooms, support teachers, give students the resources they need.
And get rid of all that waste and bureaucracy in the process.
That's the theory, anyway.
Now, let's be honest here. There's another side to this whole debate that we can't ignore.
Yeah, the cultural stuff, the hot button issues.
Exactly. Our sources talk about concerns about things like LGBTQ propaganda being pushed in schools.
And for some folks, abolishing the DOE is seen as a way to take back control over those kinds of issues. Keep the feds out of it, let local communities decide what's appropriate for their kids.
It's about values, right?
Absolutely. And for some people, those values are in direct conflict with what they see happening in schools.
So they want the power to push back, to shape the curriculum, to protect their kids from what they see as harmful influences.
It's a complicated issue, no doubt about it.
Now, here's a historical wrinkle that I found fascinating.
Hmm.
Our sources talk about this idea that the American education system is actually based on a model from Prussia, way back in the 1800s.
Yeah, the Prussian model. It's a pretty controversial topic.
So what's the deal with this Prussian model?
Well, the basic idea is that it was designed to create obedient soldiers and factory workers.
Obedient, like follow orders, don't ask questions kind of thing.
Exactly. And some folks argue that this model is still influencing how we educate kids today.
That we're still focused on conformity and rote memorization instead of critical thinking and creativity.
And that this is holding back our students, making them less prepared for the challenges of the 21st century.
Which brings us to another sobering topic. Literacy rates in the U.S.
Yeah, not a pretty picture.
Our sources cite some pretty alarming statistics. Something like 21% of adults in America are considered illiterate.
And over half read below a 6th grade level.
It's kind of shocking, really.
Yeah.
We think of the U.S. as this advanced nation, a leader in education.
But the reality is, we're lagging behind many other developed countries when it comes to literacy.
And what's even more worrying is that this problem starts young. Apparently, about a third of 8th graders are functionally illiterate.
That means they're struggling to read and write at a basic level.
And that's a huge problem.
Absolutely. It impacts everything. Their ability to learn, to get a job, to function in society.
And for folks who want to abolish the DOE, they point to these literacy rates as further proof that the system is broken.
They say it's failing to teach kids the most basic skills.
And they see getting rid of the DOE as a way to, well, hit the reset button.
Start fresh, try something new.
Now, we've got to be fair here. There are strong arguments against abolishing the DOE, too.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just blowing it up and starting over.
One big concern is funding.
The DOE provides a lot of money for schools, especially in low-income areas.
They also fund things like after-school programs, special education, all sorts of important stuff.
And then there's the whole issue of civil rights.
Right. The DOE is responsible for enforcing laws that protect students from discrimination.
Discrimination based on race, religion, disability, gender.
And there's a real worry that without the DOE, those protections could be weakened.
Especially in states that maybe don't have the best track record on civil rights.
So there's a fear that some students would be left behind, vulnerable to prejudice and unequal treatment.
And that's a big deal.
Another argument in favor of keeping the DOE is that it provides some level of consistency across the country.
Right. It sets standards, ensures that kids are getting at least a basic level of education no matter where they live.
Whereas if you left everything up to the states, you could end up with a really uneven playing field.
Some states might invest heavily in education, while others might cut corners.
And that could create huge disparities in opportunities for kids.
Not to mention the potential for things to get pretty politicized at the state level.
Oh yeah, imagine the culture wars playing out in every school board meeting across the country.
It could get messy.
Now, beyond the whole DOE debate, our sources also touch on some broader trends that are impacting education.
Yeah, like technology.
Social media, AI, it's changing everything.
Absolutely. And it's raising all sorts of new questions about how we teach and how kids learn.
Like, how do you keep kids engaged when they're constantly bombarded with distractions?
You hear a lot about TikTok brain these days.
Right, this idea that kids' attention spans are shrinking because of all the short-form video they consume.
It's a real challenge.
And then you've got AI, which is obviously a powerful tool, but it also has the potential to be misused.
Like, what happens if kids become too reliant on AI to do their thinking for them?
Do they lose the ability to solve problems, to think critically, to be creative?
It's something we need to be thinking about very carefully.
And then there's the whole trend of homeschooling, which is becoming increasingly popular.
Some families are choosing to opt out of the traditional system altogether.
Whether it's because they're unhappy with the curriculum, the school environment, or they just want more control over their kids' education.
It's another sign that the one-size-fits-all model might not be working for everyone.
Our sources also mention Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky,
Hmm.
and his idea from a while back about leveraging technology to make the best teachers accessible to everyone.
Yeah, he talked about filming those amazing teachers in action and sharing their lessons online.
So any kid, anywhere in the country, could learn from the best of the best.
It's a cool idea, and it speaks to the potential of technology to transform education.
And it also highlights the fact that there are some incredible teachers out there who are doing amazing work.
And maybe we need to find ways to support them better, to give them more freedom to innovate, to share their knowledge.
Absolutely.
It kind of feels like we're at a turning point in education.
Yeah, like the old model is starting to crumble,
And we're not sure what's going to replace it yet.
but it's exciting in a way.
Definitely. It's a chance to rethink everything, to build something better.
To create a system that truly prepares kids for the future.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. So let's do a quick recap here. We've explored the arguments for and against abolishing the Department of Education. We've looked at the concerns about costs, performance, and the role of the federal government in education. We've also touched on some broader trends that are impacting education, like technology and the rise of homeschooling. It's clear that these are complex issues and there's no easy answers.
That's for sure.
But what do you think? Where do you stand on all of this? What do you see as the biggest challenges facing education today? And what are the solutions? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, jump into the comments and let us know.
And if you found this deep dive valuable, please do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the Journeyman Podcast. We'll keep exploring these big ideas, and we'd love for you to join us on the journey.
And one more time, check out Rattlesnake TV on YouTube. They're doing some really interesting work, and we're grateful for their insights.
Thanks for listening.